This is the homepage of Beyonce's new brand, and it looks amazing with nice hover effects, great content, even has a nice slider element and more great content. And this is what I've just built with an instant, without code and all in a matter of minutes. And in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how you can build something like this yourself. So let's get started. Here we have the blank canvas, and if I head over to brand styles, you can see that I've prepped this build a little bit. So I've added all the brand colors that Cécred also uses and the different textiles. Let's get started with building the hero section. So it's a nice background video with text on top and a button. So let's drag in our base row, set the height to 600 pixels, fixed height, and then we can change the fill to a color, an image, but also a video. So let's paste in the link, and here we have the background video. On top of this video, we want a text element and a button. So we drag in another row, and then within this row, we drag a text element, there we go, and then a button underneath. If we select this base row again, we can see that the distribution is set to distribute from the start. So this first row is at the top, but we want this row to be at the bottom. So we change the distribute setting to start at the end. There we go. Then there's one more thing we need to do. As you can see, there's little to no space between the outer edge of the site and then where the text and button starts. And what we need to do is select the base row again and then add some inside spacing to the top and bottom, 40, and left and right 40 as well. And as you can see, there's a bit of space. This row that we have dragged in that holds the text and the button has a fixed height. This is by default, but let's delete it so the height will fit the content within. There we go. And now let's change the text and the button. So this should say "You are Cécred." There we go. And this can say "Shop now," all in capital. Then this text should be white. So let's change the color and then select the right font, text white. There we go. And then this button should be black with a white border. So we have selected the button. As you can see, the fill is set to blue. We change this to the brand color. There we go. And then we add a nice border, make the border white. And then there's a radius of 8, which causes this button to have nice round corners, but we don't want this. So let's delete it and then make the button a bit bigger. And we can do this by changing the inside spacing from 12 top and bottom to 16 and the sides to 24. This actually looks about right. Then what we also need to do is add a hover effect. So whenever someone hovers over this button, the color should change to a brown color. So to do this, we select the button, head over to interactions and add a trigger, add the mouse hover trigger, and then change the fill to this brown color. And as you can see, when we preview, whenever you hover over the button will become brown. Next up is the section with the 3 products. So let's drag in another row underneath. Then we start with adding some inside spacing, the same settings as the section above, 40 top and bottom, 40 left and right. And then we can drag in 3 different columns, which will be the 3 products. We should start by creating the first row and finishing that row completely. And then we simply duplicate the row and change the content because that's the fastest way to work. So within this first row, let's quickly delete the fill color. And then we drag in 2 more rows. This top row will hold the image, and then the row at the bottom will hold the different content. So the name of the product, the price, and the star ratings. Let's first change the top column, change the fill to the correct image, the product image, which is this one. And then we set the height to fixed and change this to 400 pixels. I think that looks about right. Then with the column underneath, we can change the height to 100 so we see it again. And within this, we drag in 2 more rows. And the reason for this is that we want this top row to hold the 2 text elements. So the name of the product on the left and the price on the right. And then within the other row, we want the star rating element. So we go back to the layer panel, select this main row and change the height to the fixed height to fill. So it fills it. Let's also delete the fill color so we also see better what's happening. Within this first row, we drag in 2 text elements. 1 and 2. There we go. We can change the height to fit, so the height will fit the content within. And then we can change the distribute setting to left and right. And then in the row underneath, we can create the star rating. So let's drag in an icon, change the icon to the star icon, set the color to black, and then change the fixed width and height to, let's say, 20 by 20. We should also change the type to fill, so the star icon is nice and black. And then we can duplicate this. So let's do that. One more time, another time. There we have it. And then next to the star rating, we can drag in another text element. And this can say 71 reviews. Let's delete this fill color. Let's also delete this fill color. Delete the fixed height of the row that holds this content. There we go. And then what's left to do is fill in the correct content and add the right styles. Now that the right content is filled in, we should work with some of the settings. So the gap between the image and the text is a little bit too big because the gap is set to 32. Let's change this to 16. And then the gap between this text element and these star icons is also a little bit too big. So let's also change this to 16. There we go. And then the gap that exists between the different star icons is also too big. So let's change this to 8. And then we should set the alignment to align from the center. So this text element is nice in the center of the star icons. This is looking quite good already. And now what's left to do is add a hover effect to this image. What we want to accomplish is that whenever someone hovers over this image, another image will appear and a button will appear. So let's first start with the button. We drag in a button on top of the image. We change the distribution to the center and the alignment to the bottom. Then we should add some inside spacing so there's space between the outer edge of the image and the button. So let's say 10. This looks about right. Actually, what's even smarter than creating the whole button from scratch is just simply grabbing this button, copying it, and then pasting it on top of the image right here. There we go. The problem is that right now the button is also visible, but we don't want this button to be visible just when you see the site. We only want it to be visible when you hover over the image. So to do this, we select the button element and then set the opacity to 0. Then we head over to interaction, and then we can see that the interaction of the other button is still there, but we don't need this. So let's add another hover effect, and then we change the opacity to 100. So right now, if we preview the site, we can see that there's no button visible, but when we hover over the button, it becomes visible. The only problem is that whenever we hover over the image, the button is not visible yet, and also the image does not change. So to accomplish this, we select the image and then add another hover effect. This hover effect, we change the fill to the other image that we want to show when someone hovers over this image, which is this one right here. Then we go back to the button and we can see that there's a trigger coming from the main image. So right now, if we preview and we hover over the image, you can see that the image changes and also the button becomes visible. And that's exactly what we want. We can add one final touch, and that's make the animation a bit more slow. So let's say 250 milliseconds. Let's preview again. And as you can see, the animation is a little bit smoother, and that's what we want. What we should do now is make some final changes to this first product element. So the text is just a little bit too big, and there's also a bit too much space between the image and the text. So let's select the text element. There we go, and change the size to 14 pixels. The same for the price element, and then the same for this reviews text element. And we can also make these icons a bit smaller. And last but not least, let's make the gap that exists between the different icons also a little bit smaller. So let's change this to 4, and this looks about right. One final thing is maybe decrease the space between these two elements. So let's change this to 10, and this looks about right. So what we do right now is duplicate and then simply change the content. So let's do that. And now fill in the right images. Now let's preview what we have actually built. As you can see, we have added 3 nice hover effects, and everywhere where we hover over the image, the button also appears. What we should do next is actually change the background color of the main row. So we select the main row, go down to Fill, and then select this nice and gray background color. And what we can do next is build the next section, which will hold an image and text elements on the left. So let's drag in another row. And now right away we add the top and bottom spacing to match with the other sections. And let's also change the fill color immediately to the nice and gray color. And then within this row we drag in 2 columns. One column will hold the image and the other will hold the text elements. So first let's change the fill color of this column on the right. Go to image and then select the right image, which is this one right here. We can set the height to fit and then change this to 600 pixels. This looks about right. And then here on the row on the left, we drag in text element, more text, and we can drag in a button, but it's better if we just duplicate or copy this button right here and paste it within. There we go. As you can see, the distribution is set to start from the top, but we want it to start at the end. There we go. This looks about right. Now let's delete the fill color and fill in the right content. Next, we need to build a bit more of a complex section with an image on the left and then on the right a slider element. So let's duplicate this section right here because we can use the foundation. Change the image to the left. We can delete a few of these text elements because we don't need them. And now let's change the image to the correct image, which is this one right here. And then in this row on the right, we should drag in the slider element. So under advanced and interactive, we can find the slider. And now let's customize this a little bit. We click on edit slider. We can see that it's set to show 3 slides, but it's a bit too cramped. So let's change that to 2 slides. Also, if we take a look, there's a lot of spacing within this slider element. It snaps to the bottom. That's because in this row it's set to distribute from the end, but we need to distribute it from the middle. There we go. So it's nice in the middle. And then we also want to create a bit of overflow. So right now, since we set the inside spacing to 40 top and bottom and 40 left and right, we have this space that exists between the outer edge and then the slider element. But in this case, we don't want this. So let's select the base row, click on this icon right here, and then delete the spacing inside on the right from 40 to 0. And as you can see, the slider now snaps to the outer edge of the site. The slider element will actually hold the same sort of items that we have created above. So instead of creating all these slides from scratch, what we should do is go to the top, then copy one of these rows, copy, and then within this slide right here, let's quickly delete the fill color, and then we should paste what we have built. There we go, and now we need to make a bunch of changes. So the height is set to 400, but it's a bit too big in the slider element, so let's change this to 350, and let's make this slide a little bit wider. To do this, we select the main slider element, click on Edit Slider, and change the slide size from automatic to manual. There we go. Now we go back to the first slide and then change the width to a fixed width of 300 pixels. This looks about right. Let's quickly preview what we've just done. As you can see, we have dragged in a slider, and now let's duplicate this first slide and then fill in the correct content again. So we have this first slide right here in the layer panel. Now let's duplicate this. There we go. Let's duplicate this one more time and then a final time. Let's delete the old slides. Go back to the first slide, and now let's fill in the correct content. The correct content has been filled in, and what's next is making sure that this navigation is not at the bottom of the slider element, but actually right in the middle. And to accomplish this, we don't want the position of this navigation to interfere with the position of other elements. And right now it does, because the position is set to relative. However, if we change this to absolute, you can see that the position of the other elements are not influenced anymore by the position of the navigation element. So let's first delete this preview button because we don't need this in this build. And then we can change the absolute position with a few presets. So this is the preset of the bottom right corner. So let's select this and then change the bottom value and the right value. First, let's change the right value to 10 pixels. So there's a bit more space between the outer edge of the site and this navigation button. And then let's change the bottom value to 210. This actually looks about right. Now let's preview what we have just done. As you can see, the slider works and also the button still works, which is really, really nice. What we need to do next is add a button underneath the slider element and then text above. So let's copy this button right here. Copy, go to this row, and then we paste. This should say shop kits and bundles, and then we drag in another text element on top of this slider. And this should say kits and bundles, kits and bundles, the right color and a bit of a larger font. There we go. And then there should be another text element underneath, and that should say experience curated sets to create your own sacred ritual. And then we can make this text a lot smaller. Let's say 16 pixels. And this looks really good. Then one more thing we can do is make this image a bit higher. Right now it's set to 600 pixels, but let's change this to 700 pixels. Then we set the distribution to start at the top. There we go. And this way we are very, very close to the actual site. Now let's preview and see what we have built thus far. We have the nice hover elements. We have a great content section. And then we have the image on the left and a nice slider element with hover effects and a working slider. The final section we need to build is a duplicate of this section right here. So let's simply duplicate this. We zoom out a little bit and then we drag this one underneath, and then we fill in the correct content. There we go. The correct content has been filled in, and this is actually already the complete page. So let's preview one final time to see what we have built in detail. So we have the nice header section with the background video, hover effect over the button. Then we have the product elements with nice hover effects. We have another great content section. Then we have the image on the left and the nice slider. And then we have another great content section underneath. And that's it for this video. I hope you have a good understanding on how to build something similar like this, and good luck.